Good morning. Welcome to iRebel on the Voluntary Virtues Network. We are your hosts, Sarah and Meredith, and we thank you for joining us today.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning. So our first topic today is going to be something new we learned this week. This comes from you, Sarah, and we're learning about the Turing test. So the Turing test is a test of a machine's ability to exhibit intelligent behavior equivalent to or indistinguishable from that of a human. In the original illustrative example, a human judge engages in natural language conversations with a human and a machine designed to generate performance indistinguishable from that of a human being. So this is a test made up by Turing. Let me, this person. Well, a scientist named Turing, and it's basically to be able to mark when a machine is allegedly intelligent or artificial intelligence. So this is supposed to say if you can have a conversation with a computer and not be able to tell if it's a human, then it's an artificial intelligence. So that's new. This is, I guess it's been around for a while, and it was coined by a scientist named Turing. That's why it's called the Turing test, and it's been used in various forms throughout the years. Let me see if I can find. Alan Turing is his name, and so it's 1956. It looks like.
So it's been around for a while.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I was bombarded, maybe you were, my news feed, the news, the tech coverage about this is a big deal. Why is this a big deal? Find out why this is a big deal. Turing test has been passed for the first time. Did you see a lot of that coverage?
I did. I didn't actually look at any of the articles. I saw the headlines scrolling through my feed. My initial response was sort of, yeah, right. Although it's interesting to me, this artificial intelligence is interesting to me. Chatbots are interesting to me. Although I'll keep my opinion. I'll hold off on my opinion.
Okay.
Later.
So, of course, I found an opposing view, which I thought was interesting, the rebel view of the Turing test. And this was covered in Tech Dirt. No, a supercomputer did not pass the Turing test for the first time, and everyone should know better. I think I had heard of the concept, but I didn't really know exactly what that meant when I read the initial headlines. The Turing test has passed. So I looked into it, and then I found this, and I thought, oh, this is interesting. I love the opposing view.
Yeah, me too.
It's always good to have a full view.
Right.
So I'll read a little bit of this. So this weekend's news in the tech world was flooded with a story about how a chatbot passed the Turing test for the first time, with lots of publications buying every point in the story and talking about what a big deal it was, except that almost everything about the story is bogus, and a bunch of gullible reporters ran with it because that's what they do. First, here's the press release from the University of Reading, which should have set off all sorts of alarm bells for any reporter. Here are some quotes, almost all which are misleading or bogus. The 65-year-old iconic Turing test was passed for the very first time by supercomputer Eugene Goostman during Turing Test 2014, held at the renowned Royal Society in London on Saturday. Eugene, a computer program that simulates a 13-year-old boy, was developed in St. Petersburg, Russia. The development team includes Eugene's creator, Vladimir Veselov, who was born in Russia and now lives in the United States, and Ukrainian-born Eugene Demchenko, who now lives in Russia. If a computer is mistaken for a human more than 30% of the time during a series of 5-minute keyboard conversations, it passes the test. No computer has ever achieved this until now. Eugene managed to convince 33% of the human judges that it was human. So, okay, almost everything about the story is bogus. Let's dig in. So the author cites six points. It's not a supercomputer, it's a chatbot. It's a script made to mimic human conversation. There's no intelligence, artificial or not, involved. It's just a chatbot.
Duh.
2. Plenty of other chatbots have similarly claimed to have passed the Turing test in the past, often with higher ratings. And he cites a story from 3 years ago about another bot, Cleverbot,
Hmm.
passing the Turing test by convincing 59% of the judges it was human, much higher than the 33% Eugene Goostman claims.
Yeah.
It beat the Turing test here by gaming the rules, by telling people the computer was a 13-year-old boy from Ukraine in order to mentally explain away odd responses.
Hmm. Cheating.
Cheating. The rules of the Turing test always seem to change. Hell, Turing's original test was quite different anyway, and there's a link to the original test, which I didn't look into, which we should maybe for next time. As Chris Dixon points out, you don't get to run a single test with judges that you picked and declare you accomplished something. That's just not how it's done. If someone claimed to have created nuclear fusion and cured cancer, you'd wait for some peer review and repeat tests under other circumstances before buying it, right?
Yes.
And number 6, the whole concept of the Turing test itself is kind of a joke. While it's fun to think about, creating a chatbot that can fool humans is not really the same thing as creating artificial intelligence. Many of the AI world looked on the Turing test as a needless distraction.
Hmm. That makes sense to me too.
Yeah.
So those are interesting, and definitely the rebel point of view, which seems to be what we fall under most of the time for some
Mm-hmm.
reason. Thus the name of the show. Um, and that brings us into something we plan on doing weekly, which is sort of fun, philosophical fun for our audience. And weekly, we're going to be asking a question that might have different opinions depending on who you are, and we ask that you put your answers in the comments below, and so we'll go through that next week. So this week's question is it possible for machines to be able to think? Let me actually pull this up. Um, yeah, is it possible for machines to think? I have my opinion, and I'm sure Sarah, you have yours, but we want to hear yours. So that's that's the question. Put it in the answers below, or put it in the comments below, and we will read your comments on next week's show.
And if there aren't any, we'll be happy to give our opinion and talk about it.
Absolutely, yes. So yeah, that's all for that. Moving on for our top story this week. I know we were going to talk about this, the man who refused to bake the cake for the gay couple is in the news again, and he is in the news uh, because of the sentence, basically. So um, this story is from the New American,
Mm-hmm.
and it starts: a Colorado baker found guilty of discrimination for refusing to bake a wedding cake for a same-sex couple must go through sensitivity training as part of his penance and rehabilitation. Ooh, both scary words. Um, so in December of last year, administrative law judge Robert Spencer found Jack Phillips, owner of Masterpiece Cake Shop in the Denver suburb of Lakewood, guilty of discriminating against same-sex couple Dave Mullen and Charlie Craig when he told them in July 2012 that he couldn't bake them a wedding cake because homosexual behavior conflicted with his Christian beliefs. So for part of his sentencing, he and his whole staff, including his 87-year-old mother, is required to go to sensitivity training, whatever that means. We're not entirely sure.
Yeah. And just the fact that he's making this statement or to not bake the cake based on religious views, is this basically like retraining his religious views?
I would imagine. I can't see that it would be anything else. It doesn't seem like he is personally, from what I've read, I'm not sure, I don't know him, but it doesn't seem like he is personally intolerant toward gay couples. It's
Right, because he's willing to bake other cakes, just not specifically wedding cakes.
Right. Yeah. So and that's actually what he said he was going to do, which is kind of interesting. Which brings up a few other points. But basically, he said, "Well, I will go through this sensitivity training." I mean, he has to, and
Hmm.
he's required to bake this particular wedding cake for this couple. However, in the future, he decided not to bake wedding cakes at all instead of going against his moral convictions. So that's really interesting. Now he will no longer uh, be baking wedding cakes at all. Uh,
Right.
yeah.
So looking into this, I was a little curious about the couple suing the baker and their motivation. And I found there are multiple stories of lawsuits against photographers, churches, and even the state. In Missouri, there was a case against the state for not seeing a marriage as legitimate.
Mhm.
So I think we should talk about the voluntarist view of this um, situation.
Yeah, definitely. So the first disclaimer when we're talking about the voluntarist view is that I don't know. I mean, I'm an individual, but my individual point of view is that I am tolerant of all lifestyles. I don't condone discrimination against people for being homosexual or any other peaceful thing about them.
Hmm.
Tolerance is very important to me. Um, and that's another thing too, is that uh, we want intolerant people to be out in the open so that we know if
Right.
where to put our money. Um, and even though I'm not homosexual, I would rather give my money to a person who is tolerant of gay marriage, really. Um,
Absolutely.
so that's the first disclaimer, just to
Hmm.
get that out of the way. uh, but there's a big difference between suing an individual business and suing the state, or
Hmm.
forcing an individual and forcing the state.
Right. Because with the baker, there's always another baker. That's what the market would provide, especially if we're talking about a free voluntarist society. There would
Yeah.
always be another baker, another photographer, another church.
Hmm.
However, you're living under the state laws in your state. I find it interesting that they're suing the state in Missouri.
Yeah, I
There are
think that.
some, um, but the difference being that the baker, there's other bakers, there's other options,
Mhm.
and um, I think we missed the point that it's the state that's really causing all the problems here. Really.
Yes, yes.
Think of the money, the time wasted with the litigation, with paying the lawyers and the court fees and the time, um, just that. And also, I read and I've heard people compare this to, well, what about lunch counter laws in
Mm.
the South? You can't have businesses can't discriminate. You're a public business, you need to be open to the public. So that's an interesting comparison. I don't think it's the right comparison.
It's very confusing, actually.
Hmm.
It for it continues a confusion that seems to be in a lot of people's minds, and that is the difference between public and private, really. So by saying this is a public business, you're saying that every single business is a public business, and really, the word public is euphemism. It's a euphemism for the state. This is a um, public is always for the state. Public parks are governmental parks, that kind of thing. So so basically, if you're saying that a business is a public business, then all businesses would be public business, which means all businesses are owned by the state, which is not true. And
I think the sentiment stems from also that you didn't build this. It
yeah,
was
it's a very
passed around.
similar. it's a
Hmm.
similar sort
If
of
you're
communist.
benefiting, yeah, if you're benefiting from the state for your business, then you have to.
Hmm.
But
Which brings up another kind of thing is that you don't have to, when the state uh, creates something or makes a law, that's blanket over everything.
mhm,
Um, and when a private business does something, well, that's just contained to their private business. So it made me think of the story of my mother and her baptizing my younger daughter. She's a Christian and she went to, I think it was a Catholic church. I'm not
your
entirely
younger
sure.
sister.
My younger sister, yeah. And my mother had my daughter just after my parents were divorced, or my younger sister just after my parents were divorced. And that because they were divorced, her church refused to baptize my younger sister. So instead of suing, she just went to a different church and
Hmm.
she was baptized. So,
Now, if
but
the state had said,
right. So if the state had said, well, it's policy that we don't baptize children of parents who are divorced, then she would have had no option. There would be no place for her to go, and my sister would still not be baptized, which I guess means something to her, but not, but still, I mean, it's a big difference.
right, right,
And so not only was she able to take her business elsewhere, she and get baptized still. She get my sister baptized. She took her business away from that particular church and whoever thought that was discriminatory with her.
right,
So
right.
that's yeah, and that brings us to the fact that markets regulate themselves if they're allowed to. So there are lots of things that people could have done to basically have the same outcome of this man not baking wedding cakes anymore. Um,
Right. Good
yeah,
point.
yeah. So and this, I mean, him not baking wedding cakes anymore was his decision. This was not the state's decision. They didn't
Hmm.
come down and say you shouldn't bake wedding cakes anymore. They said you must bake this wedding cake for this couple. But so he was the one who decided not to do it anymore. However, if it were left up to the market, which just quick definition of the market, our definition of the market is all people on the planet who are active and buying and selling and trade, even doesn't have to be with money, just trade. So that
All
is the
voluntary
right, all voluntary
interactions.
interactions, basically. So that's the market can be incredibly regulatory when it comes to these things. We don't need the state to come down, and whenever it does, it screws things up anyway. And
And the
it's
state is the biggest discriminator against gay marriage. In most states, it was illegal. It wasn't viewed as a legitimate marriage.
mhm.
Now that's changing, um, but it's always the case, right? The state is the biggest. Like comparing the lunch counter law, those were laws.
Mhm.
State had that as a law.
Right.
That
So
wasn't an individual business. Now, maybe they petitioned or used their influence and power to get those laws passed. So they
mhm.
were using the state power to set laws.
Yes, but that wasn't everybody. It couldn't have been. So if I had
No.
a lunch counter back then, and I wanted to give service to anybody who came in, I was not allowed to.
You were not allowed to.
Hmm. So that not only hurts the people you're discriminating against, you're hurting the entrepreneurs who would like to service anybody they want.
Right. And you'll hear people say, well, I wouldn't, I don't want to live in a world where a business could open and discriminate and put signs up and say, we will not bake cakes for gays.
Hmm.
I don't know how likely that is that would happen, but you'd be free to opt out, and there would be another opportunity, and you would know.
Hmm.
it wouldn't be underground. I would like to know the people
Absolutely.
that I don't want to associate with and do business with.
Absolutely. Yeah, so that you can use your, I guess, voting with your wallet to give your business to somebody who you feel is more deserving. And, I mean, there are all, even if you don't opt out like that, or opt to use a different business, there are many creative ways that we see all the time, that the market, the free market, regulates or puts restrictions on intolerant people or people with messed up views. I'm not okay. So I don't agree. I'm not a Christian, and I don't agree with intolerance toward gay couples of this nature. However, I don't have any problem with people who are Christian, and it's up to them to say what they're going to believe or not, as long as it's peaceful. So
Hmm.
you could argue that this is sort of not peaceful, but really nobody was hurt. So it is,
No. And I just have one final question. Will they eat the cake?
yeah, good question. Would you eat it?
No.
No, I wouldn't either. Yeah.
So we should probably move on to our next subject that we're
Okay.
going to cover.
Our next subject is, this one's fun. This one everybody will recognize. This is House of Cards, and Sarah's watched the whole thing. I've watched almost the whole thing. I haven't gotten through, but this was a big deal in the volunteer circles. Many articles written about it. Got lots of acclaim from big names for sort of exposing uh, the methods and the motivations behind politics. Um, so
Yeah, I've been I've struggled a little bit with my feelings for House of Cards. On the one hand, I thought it was amazing that this was just being the onion was being peeled back, and everyone's getting this view of how crazy it really is, the
mhm,
state and the power and the opportunistic, crazy things that Frank Underwood does and the other politicians in the show. However, I'm bothered because I don't know that the ordinary viewer of it is seeing it that way.
right.
They're seeing it like he's the protagonist. He's people are you do find yourself cheering for him.
hmm
Maybe. I mean,
And
it
that
makes me
was,
think.
and when it first came out, I didn't want to watch it because it was politics, and it's that subject turns me off initially, but I was persuaded into watching it through these articles and acclaims that it was getting. And when I saw it, I was turned off by it, for the reason that you just said. This is the protagonist, and we're supposed to, or not supposed to, but you end up uh, feeling for him, rooting for him, he and his wife. And by the way, I so far haven't seen any sign that his wife is evil or breaking the non-aggression principle at all, but that's just a side note. But so that was the first thing that turned me off, is that this is going to glorify this behavior for a lot of people. And two more points that I didn't like about the show. One is that they sort of portrayed this couple as kind of having superhuman abilities, uh, always on top of it, just go go go, ultra ambitious, but not just ultra ambitious, really intelligent, sort of being able to predict things in an incredibly timely manner, um, and
Hmm.
and so that bothered me too. It's sort of still kind of hanging on to this idea that politicians can be superhuman in this way. I
Right.
don't, they can't. Nobody's superhuman, otherwise they wouldn't be human.
Right.
So that's another thing. And then the third point, if I can remember it now that I went through that whole rant, hmm, we'll go on with what you were saying.
Yeah. Well, the superhuman. So it is a caricature, right? Of politicians. But yeah, it's also the always knowing, always being on. Um, and it's interesting because you do find yourself not wanting him to get caught.
Yeah.
So if you're viewing this like, okay, he has good ends, he has, maybe you're thinking, I think people think if they just get the right person in office,
Mm-hmm.
it'll be okay. Now, I say if your system requires the right person being elected, then your system's the problem.
Yeah.
But I don't think the vast majority of people feel that way.
No. In
And
fact, I.
so they may be viewing this like, we're winning, our guy is winning, and this is our guy.
Mhm.
And he probably has, I mean, you know his intentions, but you do see how things can be swayed that it's for, the best of intentions or for good ends.
Mhm. And so that's that reminded me of the third thing I had a problem with. And this was, I think, the biggest problem that I had with it, and it reinforces what you were just saying, is that in this whole show, there were only really two people that acted in the way that he did. Frank Underwood, the main character, and there was another businessman who had the same sort of means of getting things done. Um, but to me, and so that would imply that everybody else is sort of the right person. Everybody else has these super upstanding intentions, and they're doing things for the people like they should, and they're really just trying their best to be moral. But to me, that's not how it works at all. And besides the superhuman element, I believe that everybody in politics, because of the nature of the beast, is, I wouldn't say corrupt because it's just that's the way it goes, but everybody plays that particular game. So it doesn't go far enough. Everybody in that business is in that business because they can play that game, because they're good at that. So that's the
Right,
modus operandi of all politicians.
right. So we
It's
both struggled with whether or not we like this
mm-hmm,
series for various reasons. And then I came across this article in the Telegraph about the creator of the American version of House of Cards,
mm-hmm.
Beau Willimon. And the article is titled House of Cards creator Beau Willimon, All Politicians Are Murderers. It's quite a
Wow,
profound statement.
that is profound.
I would agree.
Yes, indeed.
So here's the quote in the article. All politicians are murderers or have to be willing to be murderers. Here you have a dramatization of that thing in them which allows them to do the unspeakable, whether that is facilitating the death of a congressman or sending 100,000 troops to war.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
I've just had a newfound appreciation for the show. I mean, that it sort of clears a couple things up for me. At least I know the intention of the creator is in the right place, right?
Right.
And you
Because you
said,
question that. You don't know. What angle is this coming from?
yeah, yeah. And we only have a few minutes left,
Yes.
but there was something else. Oh, how first explain before we do our ending. Why don't you explain how he knows about all this stuff?
Yes. Okay. So I had an in the trenches view of a campaign. So let me start up here. I'm sorry. Williman's view of politics has been partly shaped by his time working on real life political campaigns, beginning with the successful Senate run of Democrat candidate Charles Schumer in 1998, on which Williman worked with his best friend Jay Carson, who's now the political consultant for House of Cards. Carson was, at 26, the national spokesman for the Howard Dean campaign for the Democratic nomination in 2003-2004. A race which was ultimately won by Senator John Kerry. Williman's role was an advance man, taking care of the logistics for events. He says, I had an in-the-trenches view of that campaign, but because of Jay being in the inner sanctum, I had access to a lot of information that was way above my pay grade.
Hmm.
So I really had a sense of what the full campaign was like.
Yeah. So that's interesting. So he was able to create this from personal experience, which says something.
It does.
And it seems like it when you're watching the show.
Yeah, and that it was above his pay grade, the information that he was
Yeah.
disclosing, which is
Yeah.
always a little interesting. He doesn't
Secret.
have to worry about who he's, yeah,
Yeah.
making angry by revealing.
Yeah. Okay, so we have to sort of wrap it up.
Hmm.
Uh, so we want to leave you guys with a joke because we think that's fun. So let me pull up. Where'd my joke go?
The I Rebel joke of the week.
It is, yes. The I Rebel joke of the week is a lame light bulb. Well, it's a light bulb joke, but it's a good one. So it goes, how many soldiers does it take to change a light bulb? And the answer is Operation Illuminate the Motherland will require all forces, take longer than expected, kill millions, and then break the light bulb.
Make them laugh when you're telling them the truth, or they'll
Yeah,
kill you.
yeah,
So this was fun. I love our chats. I look
me
forward
too.
to the next one. And if you enjoyed this, you can tune in on Saturday mornings, 7 a.m. to 7:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on the Voluntary Virtues Network. Thanks to Mike Shanklin for providing us this opportunity. And it's been so fun, Meredith.
Yeah, it's been very fun. Thank you.
And we'll chat next time.
Definitely.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.